Welcome back to the Compassionate Capitalist Show. I'm Karen Rands, of course. I have a great guest today, Brandon Miller. We are going to talk about this sort of transition that we have in corporate culture for those that are listening that are maybe have been in the workforce for a number of years. You've lived and breathed this. The whole idea when I first started working with IBM, the company man, right? We had this whole idea of what a company man was and their loyalty to the company. And then there's the family man versus the family man. And as corporate culture has changed, the diversity of corporate cultures and corporate environments have changed. And this shift that we've seen within our common culture, and as I think as an age group that has entered into the workforce, and partially because they might have grown up in those days where their dad was the company man and the mom was the one at home all the time. And of course, that's a dynamic with two working parents is a common case in most households, a lot of households these days. So the idea of work-life balance became a phrase and something that people adopted where they seek certain jobs that provide that, or they end up becoming an entrepreneur in theory, because they're going to have more time for family. That's not always the case. Those of us as entrepreneurs know, right? But there's a lot of these sort of dynamics that have shifted. And as you've listened in the past on the show, and we talk about the changing workplace environment, we do a lot about corporate culture. Brandon is unique in this situation, or as an expert in this and in identifying this, because of his practice as a corporate coach, but also some really exciting stuff that he is doing specifically with his wife and impacting the family environment and sort of how you address that. And it all kind of comes together when we look to identify the strengths rather than the weaknesses to build upon fulfilling your home and family life that creates a more appealing corporate culture for a more efficient and effective and engaged workforce that contributes to the company bottom line. And that's what we're all about as compassionate capitalists, is that we want to build thriving, striving, sustainable companies that can produce generational wealth and impact their community with the wealth and the jobs that they create. And those founders have that kind of outcome, but also the investors are listening, the investors that are part of my national network of angel investors, they also see the benefit of that kind of approach to the workforce for their own outcomes of their investments in the companies they do. So you're going to get some tidbits today on things to look for, things to steer your CEOs of your companies, your executive team towards, so that you can create the kind of environment that can thrive and produce the sort of results that we all want personally and professionally. So let me tell you about Brandon. He is one of the first 7 certified Gallup Clifton Strengths Finder coaches in the world. That's almost could be a tongue twister in that I had to be very specific in saying those words. But over 15 years ago, he adopted this methodology as the executive leader for a nonprofit organization. And he has since coached hundreds of leaders to find and leverage their strengths for themselves and their teams. He is the CEO of 34 Strong, a coaching and consulting firm dedicated to improving employee engagement. He has nearly 15 years of experience providing specialized leadership training, coaching, advising, and facilitating. And also, because high achievers achieve at more than one thing, Brandon is the co-founder with his wife, Annalyn, of the Incredible Family, a consulting agency that educates, empowers, and encourages working parents to take strength-based approach to parenting in order to unlock their best selves and raise strong, happy children and teens. As successful business owners and parents to 7 children, they've authored 2 books, Play to Their Strengths and Incredible Parent, which was released in January of last year. So welcome to the show, Brandon. Thank you so much for taking time to share all your insights with my audience.
Thank you, Karen. It's great to be here.
All right. So I want to, so let's fill in the gaps a little bit on the background of the story, right? So what were you doing? What led you to go and become this one of the first of these Gallup Clifton Strengths Finder coaches? Where were you before? Were you in that corporate environment, slugging it out without the work-life balance? Because the ages of your kids, your oldest are older than 15. So talk a little bit about how you had your aha moment that said, I've got to go do this. I've experienced this. I want to lead others to overcome their challenges that you might have faced to be where you are today as my guest on the Compassionate Capitalist Show.
Sure. So starting very young, I was very inclined toward entrepreneur efforts. And in that space, I also had deep compassion and interest in supporting youth and working with kids. And so in my early 20s, made a shift in my education path toward ministry, became a youth minister. And for those who have had any experience in vocational ministry, you don't do it for the money.
Yeah.
So had other gigs, so to speak, going on, different businesses, different investments, and such. And so as I grew in both sides, on the ministry front, we were obviously very interested in developing people, always looking for new tools. And so in around 2003, this book came across my desk titled Now Discover Your Strengths, written by Dr. Donald Clifton and Marcus Buckingham. And I was asked to read it and see if there was something we could do with our team at the time. And so going through it, the crux of the book was to shift a developmental philosophy. So instead of what they referred to as the conventional approach, which was to evaluate a person's abilities, sort out what they didn't do well, put your effort there to help them be more well-rounded and more successful. This book said, well, what if we flipped the script? What if we went toward a path that said, let's build on their natural strengths? And I was captured by this idea. I thought, this is fantastic. It makes a ton of sense. Why don't we do more of this? And so the book came with an assessment. There are 34 different strengths that a person will have in a descending order. So you have your most intense down to your least intense. And so I took the assessment, and literally, Karen, I thought someone had been following me. I literally thought someone has followed me and reading my mind, because this cannot be this accurate. And so I had the thought, well, let's have our team do it. So we had the team participate, our volunteers, hundreds of people actually participate. And the result was the same all the way down the line. Wow, this is amazing. It's giving me a language. It's helping me understand myself. And for those of us who are in leadership, self-awareness is everyone's challenge. Yeah. Because the more self-aware you are, the more emotionally intelligent you can be about how to manage yourself, your highs, your lows, your mids. And so this really provided that. And so not being one to miss an entrepreneurial opportunity, I found my way into some training on the topic that was being offered through a member of our congregation at the time, and who had been trained at the source, and then launched into a consulting company with some partners, just bringing this into small businesses, think micro businesses, and just doing that while I was still vocational in the ministry. And at some point decided, actually after child number 6 was born, that dad needed one job. Talk about the whole balance integration. And because I'd always leaned more toward business, I'll always serve and always look to give back, but that really was where I wanted to go. And so making that shift, got in touch with the Gallup organization, found out they had just released their certification. So I was one of the first folks that got into their class, and in the midst of that experience, becoming certified with them, decided to launch this brand, 34 Strong, and we've been at it 9 years this month since then.
Congratulations on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So what's interesting is you were describing that, and I'm thinking about this shift in corporate culture that we've sort of seen over time, and kind of tied, one of the indicators when you look at society at large is you have like the Great Resignation. And I know that sort of the part of it is, people changing their skills so they're qualified for different types of jobs. But there's a lot of it where folks were like the corporate culture didn't respect the personal needs of the or the of the employee, or to the point about strengths, they were like, I don't seem to be moving in. They're not recognizing my strengths. They're not recognizing the things that I want to contribute. And good, when I've worked with entrepreneurs that are succeeding and great management and leaders, they sort of, in a way, they like this employee, but the employee's not the best in this particular job. So they'll look at their strengths and see where they can fit in a different job in the organization, so that their understanding of their loyalty to the company grows, because they have been seen for who they are and what their strengths are. And that's sort of like an esoteric kind of an approach. So you give a very systematic approach to, I'm just clarifying here, that you in the way that you work with the companies and the leaders to identify that and implement that in the way that they measure performance, whether they figure out resource plans and needs, and then possibly when they have exit interviews, identify if that's part, like they missed the boat on something, and that might be
Right.
part of what they have to adjust within their scope of how they run the company.
Absolutely. So when we think about a person's performance at work, we all need basic things to be successful. We need to know what you want, boss. What do you need from me to do? Be as explicit as possible, because to the degree that I understand your expectations is the relevance to how I can perform for you. And surprisingly, Karen, that simple exchange is missed about half the time. About half the time we are unsure, and we have this saying we tell companies: confused minds do nothing. They stall or they stop because there's a risk. I'll do it wrong, and then I'll feel embarrassed. I'll feel on the out. And so we see this over and over. And so the question around, why does that happen? Why so often do we miss the fundamental responsibility of any human leader to make sure the people that lead me explicitly know the expectation of what I want them to do? And it comes down to the language we speak. Typically, we teach the way we learn. If I learn a certain way, I'm going to teach you in my modality, and I expect you to pick up what I'm putting down in the way that I give it. So part of the language of any personality assessment, Clifton Strengths is one we use, is to help bring some color to this, help to understand what your style, your approach, your focus. So that's first. Right underneath that, though, is if you are clear on what we expect, then have I properly resourced you to do the job? Have I given you what you need to do that? And surprisingly, when we assess this in organizations, this is remarkably low, especially with the shift in workforces becoming more transitory, moving around, being remote, being in these hybrid situations. And so two major opportunities in any organization is clarify expectations as often as it takes, so that a person knows what you need, and then make sure they're properly resourced. Yeah. What comes right under that is what you were just saying. Now let's make sure you're in the right darn seat. Did we hire you to do what you do best? Are you going to feel like you can perform not just adequate, not just hit a C? Nobody wakes up in the morning going, you know what I want to be today? I want to be amazingly average. I want to just get by, because C's get degrees, so C's must get a job, right? No, people want to wake up and stand out and show off and do great work in the vein of what they're great at. And what we let employers know is great news. Every human who works for you is a genius. They are amazing. They have capabilities that potentially no one else has. It's worth the effort to find out what it is and how does it fit in their role. And how can you arrange work so they have an opportunity to do that every day? Not all day. We don't live under the delusion that someone's job doesn't involve work, and it's like doing chores at home. Everybody has chores. Everyone has to respond to emails and attend meetings and write reports and all the thus and such. But can you have that time and space, half your day, 3/4 of your day, to really shine And this is where it really hits it for those that really want to maximize performance in an organization. When a person knows what they need to do, properly resourced, doing what they do best, they will inevitably receive recognition and praise on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And that right now is the ball game of ball games. For the first time ever, a report was released describing the number one reason why people are leaving their jobs.
Okay.
And
Let's hear it.
Yeah, it isn't their boss. It isn't money. It's that I was not valued or recognized for the contributions I'm giving.
Yes.
And that reason, which is more, it has more worth than money because it affects my personal well-being. You talked about the family life balance, really integration, right? How do I integrate work and family? Well, how I feel about myself will absolutely affect how I engage with those I love and back to me. And so if I'm walking out of work with some level of acknowledgement and feeling strong, feeling good about myself, it's very likely I'll think good about working for you.
Yeah.
I'll maximize effort. I'll give you above and beyond. And here's a great part, Karen. It's not a mystery.
Yeah, it isn't.
The science behind this simply tells us, okay, that an individual needs to be recognized at minimum 3 times a month. That's it.
Okay.
In a 20 plus day work month, let's call it 20 to 22 days, right? They need to hear from their boss or some other stakeholder that what they did mattered. And here's how they're being appreciated. And here's how that works. And when we let people know, they go, that's it? Yeah, 3 times a month. And then we'll get into per person. How do I do that? Well, let's go back to the top. Make sure they know what you want. Make sure they're resourced. Make sure you put them in a place to do what they do best. You'll have plenty of reasons and opportunities to tell them they've done a great job and be very specific and personable.
Yeah, gosh, you hit on so many points there. And so let me kind of dig into a couple of the spots on that. So one of the things that I think sometimes, and so maybe this goes into this sort of like this hybrid. So let's talk about that, the leader, the boss first. So they've learned, because they've been coached this way, to do to give that recognition, right? They give the little attaboys or attagirls, on their virtual conference call, their update call, or however they do it, in the bulletin board, in the old workspace, ring the bell, whatever. My team huddle thing used to have a bell that they would ring and make it like, hey, so and so just did such. So is how we did it at IBM at one point. But then does it translate, or how hard or how do you get the switch to translate for that leader to turn around and when they go home to give the praise and recognition to their spouse and their children in a similar way?
Right.
Because that's a small company. Your home environment of job delegation, financial management, it is really like a small business in a way, not, but it is in the way you have to sort of organize and plan and stuff. So how do you to make the light switch go off in a leader's brain that says, oh, maybe I'm not behaving at home the same way? Because I part of my reason for leading into this question like this is because there's been this when you used to be with a traditional office, you would spend sometimes more time in the office with your work family than you would with your home family.
Right.
And if at the contrary of that is when that leader that would get home and whoever was at the house would be, all of a sudden they're like, oh, and then this is a problem, and this is a problem, and this is a problem. And they're like, man, let me just go back to work where I get all the praise. I don't get any praise at home. And, so the dynamic becomes a negative rather than a positive, and positive, you know what I mean? It's like that thing it's been something that's not new, that's been around forever. I think corporate cultures and good leaders and trying to get effective employees, such as what you just talked about, are trying to solve that problem this way. We talk about a little bit of your experience in working with leaders and them having that aha moment of satisfaction at home and satisfaction at work and likewise.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, when a person really begins to grasp strengths-based development, so as a philosophy, so they start to think about, if I can shift my gaze, my vision, to start to look for more of what's right with people, to start to look for that inherent outstanding performance where I can call them out for standing out, that the fixing of a gaze can absolutely carry on into how I see the members of my family, to see my loved ones, my partners, my significants. And as I begin to look differently, and this is actually captured in the book my wife and I wrote titled Play to Their Strengths, it really is a different understanding of how to look at a kid, because every child will do something that disappoints you probably on a regular basis. And depending on the age and stage, it's the magnitude of the mess just changes as they get older, right? So the toddler who can do some level of damage is very different than the teenager who's now independent and driving can do more. And as a parent, it's not difficult to find myself focusing on what they don't do well and harping here and spending my time there, as opposed to what they do. And the simple shift that is, I think it takes a lifetime to manage, because our negativity bias that all of us have inherent really is a survival part of our biology. We look for threat assess, we look for what's wrong first to protect ourselves, but it's overplayed. It's overplayed in our development, it's overplayed in our homes. And so in this shift you're describing in the workplace, if I can really begin to build up others and have myself be built up, then I am engaged in a new pathway challenge in my mind to think differently now about those in my life. And so here's what we encourage people when they go home: start with you. So if you are being recognized at work, you are being acknowledged, you know that your well-being is satisfied, then you have that opportunity to be the one who leads that way in the household. You have that opportunity to really begin to retool and reshift. And that was the challenge my wife and I went home with. I figured, well, if I'm going to do this at work and teach other people to do this at work, we should probably start with our kids. And Karen, that's not how I was taught as a kid. That's and the shift took years, not days and not months. It's taken years. Thankfully, I have 7 case studies that I have going right now. And 3 of them are married, so I added 3 more, and now we've added grandchildren to the mix.
Oh, well,
so with all of these subjects that don't know they were signing up for our laboratory, we're learning how to prioritize what it is that we see that is worthy of acknowledgement, praise, encouragement, and then of course manage the things that aren't. Everyone has weaknesses. A phrase from Dr. Donald Clifton is, for every one strength we have, Karen, we have 1,000 weaknesses.
Yeah.
Which is essentially a simple way to say, if you're looking for weaknesses, you'll always find them.
Yeah.
Where strengths are the treasure. That's the pearl. That's the beautiful thing. And it takes effort to see it, cultivate it, and then build it into something that can be sustained.
Yeah. I think that's so spot on too, because in the workforce, there's been a sort of, for probably longer than in the home force, is the idea of encouragement and praise versus criticism. You get more out of folks. But tell you, and it is work in progress because I've been working on it a long time. But as a mother, you can see your kids hold on to the negative comments so much longer than they do. They're like, oh, and you always like, but I just praised you 20 minutes ago. You don't remember that, And so it's like, it's funny how you have to be really careful with, selective encouragement of certain behaviors and activities, because they will harbor the negative if it comes out in a knee-jerk reaction or something so much longer than they will when it comes to positive praise.
It comes down to the aggregate of time. If I spend time working to help, so I have 4 kids at home right now. If I spend time helping them spend or invest more of their effort, their energy into areas where I know their likelihood is they'll succeed, they'll do well, as opposed to areas where I know they'll struggle. It doesn't mean I don't embrace the struggle. I want that. But I have found that even sustaining excellence will involve resilience and a struggle and a challenge. Then what we've agreed to is that now we can keep setting the standard at a higher level. Well, what follows is then the reinforcement, the encouragement, so it's not just the praising of the outcome, it's the cheering on in the middle of it. It's you got this, keep going, I know you have it in you. And so that reinforcement shift toward moving someone in that direction, it's essentially just training my eyes. It's training my eyes to look for something different. And whether that's at work or at home, it's a worthwhile investment, because if we just go down the path of relationship, I have not ever met a parent that has decreed once they're 18, that's it. They're on their own. They're separate from me. I'm done. They're done. Most parents would like a relationship with their adult kids. They would like to have influence. They would like to be influenced. They would like to have a friendship. And the only way you get to there is you plan here. And we once had a parent in a workshop I was delivering. And as we were talking about this approach to thinking differently about our kids, she said, oh my gosh, put her head in her hands and said, I failed. I spent my life trying to steer my daughter into a career that she hates. And she hates me for doing it to her, because what she really wanted to do was this. And I so didn't want her to do that. I thought that would represent failure, that I forced her and pushed her. And she said, I don't even know where to start. And I said, I have great news for you. It's never too late for a do-over. You can go back and acknowledge and apologize and reset and now affirm the path that this probably, and she actually said, this is where she's strong. This is where she's the brightest, the best. And it was great to hear of that reconciliation and that opportunity.
Yeah. So in the little bit of time that we have left, about 10 more minutes, I want to do a shift a little bit over to the investors that are listening, and share a story that I think is relevant for when you're starting a company and you're looking at who's leading the company, and you might have some sort of bias towards who makes a great leader versus balancing their family life and all of that. And it's going to be distraction. It kind of addresses the role of women leadership in organizations and taking on more of that, those hats as, time goes on. So this was a very successful angel investor, had a blog email that he would send out, and he would tell a story and kind of ask a question and get engaged with his email folks. And I was on that list, and it was just really kind of him sharing his insights because he was successful. And so he said, oh, I sat down with these two female founders that wanted to start this company, and they wanted me to advise them and be a mentor to them. And I told them that I really didn't think I could do that because I was concerned about the impact on their families with them starting this company. What do you think? And I said, I was like, man, you are old. Sorry. I mean, you are old school. And I said,
Both.
why would you ask? Why would you think that question? I mean, think about why you did that. Would you ever ask two male founders that question? I said, and how many examples have you seen of folks at your age that face divorce and broken families and disenfranchised from their children, their grown children, because they spent everything in their workplace starting a company and assuming the family was being taken care of, and by providing financially for them, that was love. And so, I said, what I advise companies, regardless of this, if you're a startup, your first investors are your family, and you must go and explain to them what you're trying to do, how this benefits the vision of the family, and explain why you're going to miss a baseball game, or you might miss this or that or the other. And them being engaged, that says just because they're home, if they're on their phone and they're home at the game, watching the game and they're on their phone doing this, that, or the other, not really engaged with the family. So they have to commit to the family the same way that they commit to their employees and their vision of their startup, and everybody's that's their team. It's just the team isn't at the office. The team is at other places, and people, they all understand the common goal and the directions, and they're investing their lack of that parent there with them or that spouse. But when you're there, you don't take Saturday and go play golf and leave them at home. You go do something with the family, or you take up golf with your wife and you play golf with your wife, right? I mean, there's things, or your spouse, I should say. And so to address that, as you know, to those investors that are listening, those founders that are listening, that you have to have your stakeholders in a business need to be, your family needs to understand and be engaged in your success on that end, and you need to be engaged in the success of the family as a full contributing member of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for those of us that are entrepreneurs, we're launching endeavors, there will always be a give and pull in the family life and the business life, because the business will have needs. It'll have what it will require of us for success. I happen to be working with a mom who is a founder who's driving a company right now, and she would acknowledge this is a very difficult season of life for her while she's in the startup phase and courting her investors and such. And yet what she's equally recognized is that if she doesn't create the priority structure that you just described, where this is what I'm giving to this venture, this is what I'm going to push forward, I will put maximum effort and value, and I'll do that while also attending to my 2 young kids and my spouse, because I want to be successful in both. And when most of us think about any investment, any place where we're going to put resources, we want to invest in people success as much as we want to invest in business success. Because if we think about the person and we think about the ramifications of their life outside of the successful business venture, then we want to think through, how do I help you win all the way in life? Not just here. Of course, here is where my money is. But here, this other reality in your life is where your life is, and you winning in both is me winning in both. This is us winning. And I think that's a shift that investors are starting to realize and wake up to, that it's not just about their bottom line, and the compassion and the understanding and the concern and consideration, whether it's a mother or a father, or a person who is a brother or a son or a daughter. It's a person that has a full experience. And that reality, Karen, I think is what we're seeing now, is that the pandemic taught us some things. When you strip it all away,
yep,
when you take it all away, what did all of us think about? Because as much as business had its play, we thought about the people we love. And we tell team members this all the time, or excuse me, employers this all the time. Your people do not work for you. They do not work for a paycheck. They do not work for your company nor your brand. They work for the people at home that they are providing for. That's who they work for.
Yeah.
If you can keep that front and center, then you can actually sustain the whole enterprise by recognizing that's where they're going to default. And that's where ultimate success comes for both you and them.
Yes, very good. So I want to take this opportunity to tell everybody to go to 34strong.com to learn more about Brandon's organization, see what he can do for you. Do you have like an assessment that people can take there to sort of, how do they get engaged? Is there any teaser you've got out there?
Yeah. So what we provide on our website is an opportunity to assess the level of engagement of your leadership team. We know that in any organization, the success of the organization will rise and fall on the engagement of the leaders, people managers. And it's a great place to start. We put it out there as a way to introduce this concept of why a shift in philosophy around development, why perhaps an investment into some of those critical key components I described, expectations, resources, strengths, recognition, might be merited. So quick story, a company that we met with recently surveyed all of their leaders. 37% of them, only 37%, showed up high performing, showed up engaged. 67%, this was out of about almost 150 leaders, 67% were either not engaged, meaning just meh, just going through the motions, or worse, actively engaged against the operation. It took the initiative to spend a year and a half investing into their leaders, recognizing it's the most important investment they made. They shifted that number from 37 up past 50%, which is the first benchmark. In their 37-year history, they had the most profitable year they had ever had.
See?
With that transition.
That's it. That's the thing, that people profits, and there's another P. People performance profits. Something like that, right? That's the, that's it, man. That's it. So with that, thank you so much, Brandon, for being a guest on the Compassionate Capitalist Show. I really do believe that our listeners will have gotten great value out of this to reflect on themselves, their own corporations, the companies that they're investing in, to understand, because this is an indicator. To me, this is an indicator of long-term sustainability of a company. And can they achieve the profit numbers that they need in order to create the wealth exit that those investors and those founders are looking for, or to be able to create a generational wealth model that says it's going to be something that each generation steps in to take that business and continue to make it thrive as well. So thank you very much, Brandon. I appreciate your insights that you shared today.
Thanks, Karen.
All right, everybody, onwards and upwards. Thank you for tuning in. Please share this podcast with somebody you believe that will value from it. And please listen to my closing comments that you'll hear right now if you listen to the podcast. Thank you.